Welcome to Taste Buds. I'm Deborah Eckerling, Gold Strategist writer and foodie, and today I'm speaking with chef and cookbook author Paula Shoyer, aka the Kosher Baker. Welcome to Taste Buds.
Hi, happy to be here. Happy to talk food anytime.
Well, we are the same, and I love that you. What? How did you become the Kosher Baker?
So I went to law school and I practiced law for about 6 years. And my husband's work brought us to Geneva, Switzerland, where I also had a legal job for 2 years. And after my daughter was born, I decided to go to cooking school in Paris just for fun, not planning on a new career, just thought I would learn to bake better. Took all of those dairy pastry desserts, converted them into parve, dairy-free desserts so that I could eat them with my Shabbat meat meals. And people started asking me to cater for them. And I started teaching cooking classes in my apartment in Geneva, came back to the US, edited cookbooks for others, and then started writing my own. Took a long time to get a publisher, but then everything just kind of started.
Uh, I believe you are the third former lawyer who I've had on the show. So, what is it about cooking and baking that drives people from the legal profession?
I think it was for me kind of growing up in like the late 70s, early 80s, feeling like you were expected to pick, one of five career paths. Nobody was asking you what you love to do. I was baking with my easy bake oven when I was 5. And I baked in high school, I baked all through college, but like I never crossed my mind that that was a career. I used to sit in my grandmother's kitchen in Brooklyn and watch her measure cake ingredients with her hand. Never thought like, oh, I'm so happy in this space. How can I do this professionally and make a living doing it? Never crossed my mind. So I think it's like if you figure out that you're a creative person, you realize there's only so much creativity there is in practicing law. Also, like I'm just not somebody who wants to sit all day. I'm so happy in my kitchen, testing recipes over and over again, trying new combinations and hoping to avoid the bake and dump where something is a complete fail. So that's my happy place. So I think others also realize no, they just want to be doing more than like sitting in a chair and solving people's legal problems.
Well, I am all about, figuring out what you love and doing more of what you love and less of what you don't love. As a goal strategist, that's the message. You can't get what you want unless you know what that is. And sometimes it takes a while, but I love when someone gets there.
Yeah, and it took me a while. I mean, every publisher said no, that there was no market for a Jewish baking cookbook, and I just kept moving forward. If a wise friend said to me, "If you're doing something you love, something good will come of it," and I just proved everybody wrong and worked really, really hard to do that.
Isn't that fun when you get to prove people wrong? I mean, as
Mhm.
a former lawyer, isn't that like the point of the job too? So you've been in training.
No, it's great. I mean, it's been really incredible to look back and feel like, oh, I've published these 5 books already, and I'm definitely not done yet. I've got more.
And the hashtag baking fail is popular for a reason. What do people get wrong on baking?
Most often, they use the wrong size eggs. Recipes for baking are calibrated for large eggs. They have extra large and jumbo eggs around, so that's what they use. So that's one thing they do. Other thing is people don't always like to measure. They don't know. They don't want to take the time to scoop the flour, shake it, and then level the top. They're just like pushing it against the side of the bag or the container, shaking it like this. I've done cooking events where my helpers, all the support I get to create the food for a synagogue or a JCC or a federation group around the country. And we're multiplying the recipes and nobody's wants to measure properly. They're like, well, this is how I do it at home. My favorite is they'll measure flour in a liquid measuring cup. Imagine the horror, right? So I'm like, no, that's not right. I have to like gently explain that you can't do it that way. So yeah, people don't measure properly. It's not like cooking where you just throw another something in the soup. This is like it's a it's a formula, right? And it's been tested. It's science. Like if you're going to vary certain things, then it's just not going to come out as intended.
And I know the difference, but what is the difference between the liquid and the solid measuring cup?
Okay, so a measuring cup for solid ingredients is your typical kind of cup with a handle. The reason you're using it for solids is that you can scoop it up and then level it. If you have a Pyrex 1 cup measuring cup and you want to measure flour, you see where the 1 cup line is, but you can't get that level. Plus, if you measure in the a liquid in a dry measuring cup, if you measure all the way to the top, it's going to spill by the time you get to your bowl. So most people would put a little bit less. So once again, it's not the right amount and it's messy.
And what is your stance on the flour sifter?
Oh yeah, I really don't sift much. We don't sift anymore. When I was in cooking school in Paris in the 90s, we were not even sifting. You take a whisk, you go like this a few times, done. I sifted at a cooking class I taught yesterday because I was mi mixing powdered sugar into beaten thick meringue. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that it was more fluffy going in, but I hadn't sifted anything in so long. I think when I make French macaron, I use a sifter to make sure there's no big pieces of the almonds and cocoa or whatever I'm using, like, in my batter. But no, sifting's over.
Good to know. Anything else people get wrong with baking before we go into how to make your baking even better?
So, people don't trust themselves enough with baking. There if you're baking, right, it's as I explained, it's a formula, so you're gonna follow the recipe exactly, and if it says bake for 30 minutes, you're gonna bake it for 30 minutes. It says bake it for an hour, you bake it for an hour. You can't do that. Every oven is different. If you have a GE oven or a Viking oven, the level of heat is very different. Okay. So, to account for that, whenever you make a recipe, my recipe, anyone's recipe for the first time, you're going to reduce the baking time. So, if it says bake a cake for an hour, you're going to do it for 50 minutes. Cookies for 16 minutes, you're going to test 12 or 13. You can always add time, but it's hard to take it off. You just can't. So and trust that when you look at the challah, you know if it's done. If it's too light, it's not done. If it's too dark, get them out of there. Like what the chocolate chip cookie should look like.
I like this. It's
You have to
very
trust
d and
yourself.
it's very practical advice, and people just don't think about it. And
Just
so
reduce the baking time because I was baking at a conference this past weekend in Georgia, and I probably made like 8 different of my desserts while I was there. And after the first batch of anything, I got to know the oven a little bit better. But my other best advice is if you're making cookies for the first time, take 3 cookies and put them on your cookie sheet and bake them in the oven according to the directions, reducing a little bit of time, and see what happens. That way, you'll know exactly how to bake the other 30 cookies. And you didn't take an entire tray, stick them in the oven, and aiming for chewy cookies and end up with absolutely crunchy cookies that you can't make chewy anymore.
oh, I love this.
So you
Okay.
test out a few cookies and then you take it out and you're like, oh, the recipe said, 14 minutes, but I took these out after 12 and they're perfect. Now I know I can time all of the next 3 trays for 12 minutes and I don't have to be staring at them every second.
And you never wanna be worrying when you're baking because it's supposed to be joy, right?
Right, but it's still work, I got distracted yesterday. I had a French style pear tart in the oven, and I went to have my breakfast, and I'm drinking my coffee, and all of a sudden, the chef in the kitchen ran out and said to me, "You might wanna check on this." Now, mind you, the recipe said to bake it for 40 minutes at 400 degrees. I baked it for 30 minutes at 375, and still after 20 minutes, it was done, and it was a little bit browned on the edges, but powdered sugar fixed that. There's lots of ways to fix things if things go wrong. I could do a whole show with you on, all the hacks of things don't come out as pretty as you like. How do we fix them?
O okay, now you have to tease us. What can you give me I like 3, so can you give 3 other simple hacks to fix
Okay.
things?
If your chocolate chip cookies are burnt on the edges, your inclination might be to take a knife and cut off those edges. Instead, take a vegetable peeler and scrape around. That way, you keep the shape of the round cookie and nobody knows that you fixed it. That's number 1. Number 2, let's say you make a pie. You tried to do a lattice, you wanted to make shades, the crimping, something broke. It just comes out of the oven and you're like, it's just not as pretty as I hoped. It's no longer pie. You take a serving spoon, you scoop out of the pan, you put it on a plate, throw some fresh berries on, you bring it out to your guests and family, and you call it cobbler. Done. It's all in the marketing. And I would say my third one is if you have a pie crust that has some broken pieces, you could literally add dabs of apricot jam and it'll help you like glue things back together again.
Wow. It's just so difficult to believe that this was not your only career.
No, this is my 3rd career. It was like I practiced law, then I was a speechwriter, and then I became a chef. And even once I became a chef, I've gone off in so many directions. Like I started off teaching cooking classes like in this kitchen here in my home, other people's homes. And I did a little bit of catering when I lived abroad. Then I started, writing recipes for myself and for my classes. And then I got on the road and I do cooking events like all around the world for different Jewish institutions. And I love meeting bakers everywhere I go because people make food to survive, but people bake to comfort, to celebrate. They're baking out of this great generosity of soul. So I love meeting bakers. They're a special breed.
And it
Even
was
the band, even the band bakers.
and I was going to ask, what is it you love about baking and kosher baking? And I think you just answered that, or do you wanna add to that?
I've always loved the challenge of it. So I had taken these recipes I learned in Paris, France, and made them all parve. They were all dairy, and that was fun. And that was fun to do back in like the late 90s. Now we have so many more dairy-free ingredients, so it makes it even more fun. And what's really nice as a kosher baker today, it's like I'm not just creating recipes for a small community, right? So when I'm creating like, natural, healthy, just great desserts that are from scratch, everybody wants those. I have a friend who goes to church every Sunday. She bought 30 copies of my first book, The Kosher Baker. Everything is dairy free. She gave it out to all of her lactose intolerant friends. Okay. I am the master of gluten free desserts. Why? Because I have like Passover books and I have like in this book, I have a whole chapter of Passover recipes and 37 gluten free recipes. So the gluten free people are like, yay, I'm giving them a whole bunch of recipes too. So I feel like what I get to do, I get to kind of nourish like so many different communities of people because you know what? The big things in life, they don't come so often. The childbirth and the new job and the great vacation and the weddings, all that stuff. Like it doesn't happen every day. But every day you could take a bite of the perfect butter shortbread or a babka bite and all of a sudden everything you forget about everything happening in your life and you have this moment of joy and you get to share it with people.
Let's talk about the babka bites because I believe that is the recipe that if you go to jewishjournal.com/podcast, you'll be able to try it for yourself. So what is it about this recipe that you love so much?
Okay, so first of all, chocolate babka is just magical. Bread and chocolate, right? I don't need to say anything else, right? That's why we love a pan au chocolat. That's why we like, we love chocolate babka more than cinnamon and other flavors. So when I created the babka bites, the idea was, oh, I'm eating a lot of the babka, a whole big slice, and if I make them smaller, maybe I'll eat less. That didn't work. You just eat a bunch of them. You have to bake them less time than you do a loaf because they're small, they can dry out quickly. So you have to kind of underbake them a little bit. And they're just so cute. It's like imagine like a little mini cinnamon bun, but with chocolate swirls, a little mini size, like I don't know, kind of 2 inches big. Like it's just so cute. They look so cute. You can glaze them also, but they're really cute and fun.
We talked about how to fix things that are broken. Do you have any other good baking tips for those who want to level up?
Absolutely. But still, I still like to go back to the basics a little bit. And then I'll talk about like how we take something we know and like bring it to another level. So one of my really important tips when you're rolling out cookie dough and pie dough, any dough that has a lot of butter or margarine and fat that could easily get too soft, or roll it between two pieces of parchment. So it's like you're going to sprinkle flour like it's raining, not like rubbing it around and big clumps, like pick it up with your fingers and go like this, like sprinkle. And then you put the dough, sprinkle, and then put parchment on top and you roll on top of the parchment. And by doing that, you'll use less flour. So you won't be impacting the taste of whatever you're rolling out.
Oh, I can't wait to try that. Okay,
Yeah.
next.
And then when you talk about like leveling things up, like once you've mastered a recipe, like you can do so much with it. So these babka bites, for example, so where you're going to put the recipe up and there's going to be a chocolate recipe. But let's say somebody makes homemade jam for you. You could use, instead of chocolate, you could spread jam. You could crumble walnuts, almonds, pecans if you like. You could chop up cranberries and apricots and dates and put those in as well. You could use white chocolate. You could use ruby pink chocolate. You could fill it with lemon curd, apple pie filling, little pieces of apples you could roll up and put like blueberry jam and fresh blueberries in them. Like there's so many ways you can customize recipes. So once you've mastered a dessert, realize like, oh, I've got this great lemon pound cake, right? It's on not on your website, it's on another website. You could take that and say, "Oh, I'm gonna serve it with pureed blueberries that are strained," or "I'm gonna put blueberries inside the cake." So, like, once you've mastered something, like, think about what you can do with it. Um, Purim's coming up, right? And I'm kind of over, "Oh, here's interesting fillings for Purim." Been there, done that. I'm into changing the dough too. I have chocolate chip dough, matcha green tea powder dough, butterfly pea powder, blue ones, all different flavored colored doughs. And even once I make my really beautiful hamantaschen, sometimes I'll melt chocolate and I'll take my triangle, okay, and I'm gonna dip just a little, like about an inch of the corner into chocolate. That's it, just to decorate it a little bit. So there's like things you can do, or you could do that and then drizzle like a white glaze, just powdered sugar and hot water, and drizzle some white around the corners of your hamantaschen, and then you can kind of elevate it and make it your own special something.
Do you remember the first, like, fabulous dessert you ever baked?
So there's no way I'm gonna remember what was baked in the Easy Bake Oven. Somebody could probably do that historical research and say, "Oh, the first 3 cakes ever mixes they ever had were the following." I'm sure it was like a vanilla cake, but in terms of something really great, um, I think it was probably the first time I came back from cooking school in Paris to Geneva, where I was living, and I took one of a famous French dessert, probably either the lemon tart or the pear tart, and I made it parve, I made it dairy free, and it was just as delicious as when I had had dairy. And that was kind of that moment where I realized, like, I'm good at this. Like, this is something that I can do more of. And that's been like, it's been fun to always to meet the challenges of trying to make things dairy free. But yeah, I think it was the first time I probably made one of those. I mean, I started making chocolate babka earlier. I got the recipe from a lovely woman who just passed away 2 weeks ago, and I baked it once I found out she passed. And I was crying as I was rolling out the dough, but I brought it to pay a shiva call to the family, and they were just so happy to eat this babka. And it was funny because my friend's brother said, I think this version's better than Ima's. And I said, don't even say that. Like, I don't want to, don't tell, I'm not trying to be better than her. I'm just trying to like give them something that they would enjoy. And it was so meaningful to like have this recipe, which I've now had. I got the original recipe for the babka loaves at my bridal shower. So we're talking 32 years ago.
Wow. And what a way to honor someone, but with their recipe, right?
Right. And like I would tell
Mhm.
people, like, if you have family members who bake wonderful desserts, get those recipes, make those recipes while they are still living so you can ask them questions when you can't read their handwriting. Or like, what's this ingredient from 1975 that I've never even seen in my life? And somebody can explain to them that the glasses of sugar were the Yahrzeit candles melted down and rinsed out, and that's how they would measure sugar when they baked back in the day.
This has been wonderful. Do you have any final food for thought?
Huh. You know, I try to make desserts that aren't overly sweet. When desserts that you're gonna buy in a bakery or packaged desserts at the store, they're gonna be too sweet, and you'll know that because when you take a bite, you don't really taste the flavor of it. So I've worked really hard to create recipes that are, like, not too sweet, so you taste the cinnamon, the lemon, the cinnamon, the chocolate so much more. So I would tell people, like, get in the kitchen and bake because the quality is so much better than what you're typically gonna buy, especially in the Jewish dessert world, unless you actually live, in Los Angeles or New York or Miami. But, like, once you live in outside those big cities, you don't have like really great, what I would say, Parisian style or Israeli style delicious Jewish dessert. So I like people to get in the kitchen. I like people to try new recipes and to like use my recipes to spread joy because that's what I've tried to do. So I really want people to use my recipes to comfort, celebrate, and uplift others.
Thank you so much for your time today, Bahala. Where can people learn more about you?
So my website is thekosherbaker.com. I am on Instagram at kosherbaker, and I'm on TikTok as Chef Paula Shoyer. The website has lots of recipes, and if you join my mailing list, I send out every holiday. I send out lists and tons of links so you can create menus out of the recipes, and that way you'll know what I'm doing. I run a food tour to Israel, and I might do food tours other places. So to sign up for the newsletter, and then you'll get to know everything. But and feel free to message me with your questions about baking stuff. People do all the time. Hour before Shabbat, hour before Rosh Hashanah, I get lots of messages.
Thank you again for joining me. Thank you for tuning in to Taste Buds with Deb. Don't miss an episode. You can subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and or your favorite podcast platform. And if you go to jewishjournal.com/podcast, you can read the articles and get the recipes that go with each episode, including these amazing babka bites, which I, for one, cannot wait to try. And you can learn more at tastefoodswithdeb.com. Until next time, bon appetit.